Hi, my name is Yuri Peleshonak, and I'm the author of the book Strings for Beatles Bass, The Beatles Generation in the USSR. I would like to talk about the Beatles and communism. I must apologize for my poor English, but I won't use any complicated words or sentences. I was born in the USSR. In the early 90s I immigrated to Canada, and since then I live and work in Ottawa. In 1996 I wrote my book in Russian. In 1999 Strings for Beatles Bass, The Beatles Generation in the USSR became available in English. This book is about the Beatles' influence and on those living behind the Iron Curtain. Not just any influence of Western popular culture, but particularly the Beatles. And it's a collection of short stories with a major line which connects them together. That the Beatles were helpful in fighting Soviet communist ideology. I would like to read one sentence on page 17. Finally, the Soviet authorities had to admit that the Beatles, the very same nothing but a fat Beatles, presented an ideological danger and were a new and powerful weapon of the West in the Cold War. And of course, reaction of the public was basically the same. How come Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and 8 years later we found out that it's not just Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher and John Paul II who pushed Mikhail Gorbachev towards his reforms, but also as a contributing factor the Beatles. And why should we believe you? Because we never heard it from any Russian politician or any Russian historian or sociologist. And I didn't have answer to this question, because I didn't have any material, any historical data to support myself. I didn't use any documents. I just described the situation, like with me, with my friends, how we used to make electrical guitars, how we used to make pickups out of telephone receivers, and it was basically my personal experience. But this idea of that Beatles were responsible for collapse of the Soviet Union and Soviet communism, in connection with the stories in my book, looks quite plausible, and despite the fairy tale ending, it's okay, it's normal. So soon this book was noticed, and in the year 2000 I took part in documentary, the ABC documentary, The Beatles Revolution, and in the fall of 2000 I was already quoted by BBC News, Beatles brought down communism, so people start to talk about it. It was a good news for me. Then in the year 2003 I got a call in January from a gentleman, introduced himself as Jeff Baker. He told that Paul McCartney is planning concert in Red Square and they need my book, so I sent to Sir Paul company MPL 2 copies of my manuscript, and they received it in January 14th according to FedEx record. And of course this future documentary, Paul McCartney in Red Square, rose the topic of the Beatles' responsibility for the collapse of the Soviet communism. Then I reprinted my book in black cover. It was, by that time, it was already used as a textbook in some North American universities. And in the year 2007, a British filmmaker, Leslie Woodhead, came to see me in Ottawa to talk about my book. His visit was covered by Ottawa Citizen newspaper on August the 2nd, the year 2007, under the headline, The Beatles, Communism and the BBC, Their Ottawa Connection. And you can read in this article that Ottawa was his first stop in making the film. The rest will be shot in Russia. So I was a little bit disappointed that still in Russia there is no information and not enough information on Beatles and communism, if he came to Canada first. But anyway, we worked hard, and he filmed interview with me, and then he filmed my song The Yeah Virus, which you can see in his film How the Beatles Rock the Kremlin at the very beginning, right after this Beatles covering footage. So, and in the year 2009 he sent me the final edited copy of the film, and it was okay, it was well done. And 10 years ago, when I introduced my book, people laughed at me, people like newspapers laughed at me. And now the words the Yeah Virus, the Beatles generation exist by themselves without me. And the Beatles' help in fighting Soviet communist ideology is a historical fact.
While in the West the Beatles Beatles stepped on all the rules. The 60s beat was echoing through all the Soviet schools. Every Russian schoolboy wants to be a star, playing Beatles music, making a guitar. Teachers looked upon all this as if it were a sin. We were building communism, but the Beatles butted in. Yet to Beatles music, the students said. Even Comrade Brezhnev sadly shook his head. Each comrade's child was in a band. But yeah, virus swept the land. But yeah, virus swept the land. And things were getting out of hand. What could they do? What could they say? Generation gone astray. But yeah, virus had them in its way. What could they do? What could they say?